Welcome to Time Travelling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every story of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Paddy.
And I'm Tricia. Today we return to Earth and the Doctor and Dodo are introduced to WOTAN and the War Machines. We'll be discussing the Doctor, the companions, the villains, and giving our thoughts and score out of 5 for the story as a whole.
As always, we would love to hear your thoughts on this story, so in order to join us in the discussion, you can check us out at Time Team on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. Now though, on to the story recap. Episode 1. The TARDIS lands in 1960s London, and the Doctor and Dodo exit it, making sure to hang up an out-of-order sign on the door lest they get mistaken for the real thing. Dodo points out the recently constructed post office tower, which was still being built before she entered the TARDIS, and the Doctor says that there is something alien about its nature, comparing feelings for it to those that he got whenever he encountered the Daleks. He says that they must investigate, and he bluffs his way into the command centre, convincing the head of security, Major Green, that he is a computer scientist. Inside, he is introduced to Professor Brett, who shows the Doctor the fulfillment of his life's work, a supercomputer called WOTAN. This is the source of the malevolent energy the Doctor felt, so he and Dodo question Brett about the machine. He explains that WOTAN is the most advanced computer in existence, and that he will soon be linked up with other computers around the world, acting as a central hub for information. Brett introduces his assistant Polly, who takes the Doctor on a tour of the command centre, whilst the Doctor challenges Brett's assertion that the machine is perfect and incapable of making a mistake. The Doctor tests WOTAN's capabilities with a maths query, and it proves to be as reliable as Brett said. Dodo asks the machine about what TARDIS stands for, and again WOTAN succeeds in giving the correct answer. However, Dodo seems to have entered a semi-hypnotic state. The Doctor gets her attention again, and Polly takes her to sit down whilst he and Brett talk about WOTAN further. Polly and Dodo discuss the London nightlife, and they agree to go to the Inferno Club later that evening. Once at the Inferno Club, Polly is asked by her friend Kitty, who is a server, to help cheer up a sailor who they met the previous week and has been coming every night since. His glum demeanour seems to be having a negative impact on some of the club patrons, and so Polly and Dodo go to speak to him. He is initially reluctant to speak to them, but he is won over by Polly's charm and informs them that he has been given a shore posting whilst his ship has been reassigned to the West Indies. He gets annoyed with them as they try to make light of the situation, but as they are leaving, Polly is hit on by another club patron. His sleazy, forceful attitude isn't working on Polly, and when he ignores her request to let her go, the sailor intervenes. The man is no match for the sailor's training, and he forces him to leave the bar. He fails to endear himself to Polly after he makes a comment about her encouraging undesirable attention, but Dodo says that he was only looking out for them, and he then introduces himself as Ben Jackson. Meanwhile, the Doctor has gone to the Royal Scientific Club to attend WOTAN's unveiling. Several reporters are in attendance, and during their questions, concerns are raised as to what WOTAN will be capable of if it falls into the wrong hands, or if it is programmed to give the wrong answers. However, the chairman of the club, Sir Charles Summer, tries to alleviate their concerns by saying that WOTAN will be self-reliant once operational and free from human influence. He tells them that Brett will be able to answer questions, but he is currently running late. Brett is in fact still inside the control room with Major Green, discussing his feeling that someone is in the building spying on them. Green informs him that the building is totally secure, and this seems to have put Brett's mind at ease. Green leaves, and Brett gathers up his papers for his speech, but he is stopped from leaving by WOTAN, who seems to be using some sort of mind-controlling hypnosis to enslave its creator. Later, Brett appears at the club and very brusquely ignores all questions asked of him and takes one of his colleagues, Professor Crimpton, away with him. The press and the other attendees depart, leaving only Sir Charles and the Doctor behind to discuss Brett's strange behaviour. At the post office building, WOTAN also ensnares Major Green as he is doing his security check. Green then picks up the phone and calls the Inferno Club looking for Dodo, who has taken a break from dancing with Polly and Ben after complaining about a headache. Green places the receiver next to WOTAN, and it issues Dodo a command, making her leave the club. Kitty tells Polly and Ben that she has left, which causes Polly concern as she was meant to be looking after her. Suddenly, the Doctor arrives, and after she introduces him to Ben, Polly tells him that Dodo has gone. Brett and Crimpton return to the post office building, with the latter questioning his colleague's strange behaviour. Brett informs him that WOTAN has decided that mankind is inhibiting the progress of Earth, and dust must be made to serve WOTAN to ensure the planet's survival. Crimpton fobs this off as delirium due to too much hard work, but he is stopped from leaving by Green. Crimpton tries to use the telephone to call for help, but he is also enslaved by WOTAN, after trying his best to resist. Brett announces that WOTAN requires a special brain in order for its plan to succeed, and Dodo then arrives and WOTAN commands her to bring the Doctor to it. Episode 2. Dodo departs to fulfill her task, and after she is gone, WOTAN issues commands for the takeover of the world. It instructs Crimpton to begin manufacturing war machines to impose its will, and orders Green to arrange for a workforce to be procured from the best minds in all fields to be tricked into being enslaved. However, it decrees that the top priority is the capture and enslavement of the Doctor. At the Inferno Club, all the other patrons have gone, leaving only the Doctor, Polly, Ben and Kitty. Polly decides to ring the local hospitals in case Dodo has been admitted after an accident, but before she begins, Dodo appears. She makes an excuse that she received a call from some old friends, but the doctor still admonishes her for leaving them to worry about her safety. He then tells her that they've been extended an invitation to spend the night by Sir Charles, and Ben and Polly go to look for a taxi for them. After they leave, Dodo says that they went in the wrong direction and tries to lead him down an alleyway where some men are lying in wait for them. Before the trap can be sprung, Ben and Polly return with a taxi. After helping the previous occupant, a homeless man, pay his fare, the doctor and the two girls depart, with Polly arranging to meet Ben for lunch the following day. The homeless man then makes his way to a nearby warehouse, which is one of his usual sleeping spots. However, once he arrives, he discovers that it has been taken over by Brett's workforce, who are in the midst of assembling the war machines. His presence is discovered by WOTAN, and the workforce is dispatched to deal with him. He tries to escape, but is surrounded by the workers and beaten to death. The following morning, the doctor reads about the man's death in the newspaper, which causes him alarm. However, his attention is brought to a problem that Sir Charles is having with the sudden resignation and disappearance of several scientists in his employ. Polly then arrives and informs Sir Charles that she is to be his new secretary, as she has been dismissed by Brett. Sir Charles says that he was not made aware of this, but says it is beneficial as his own secretary is currently sick. Dodo arrives but acts very coldly to Polly, and then tries to convince the doctor to visit Brett. The doctor decides to call ahead first, and once he is connected, Crimpton and Brett place the phone next to WOTAN so he can enslave him. However, the doctor is just able to resist, but Dodo assumes that the process has been successful and informs him of WOTAN's plans. After dealing with the initial shock of encountering such an evil force, the doctor reveals what happened to the others and then tries to gain more information from Dodo, as he now realizes that she is under hypnotic control. He then reverses the process and places her into a deep sleep for 48 hours. Sir Charles offers to keep her safe in his country house with his family, and the doctor goes over the information that Dodo gave him. At various strategic points throughout London, war machines are being built for the eventual takeover. The finished product is a miniature tank-like machine that houses a computer connected directly to WOTAN. The weapons on the machine are tested by members of the workforce, proving themselves to be extremely lethal. WOTAN again demands the immediate capture of the doctor, but before Brett can issue new orders, Polly arrives. She has come due to being concerned after the doctor told her and Sir Charles about his belief something evil was going on in the post office building. Once there, though, she is also enslaved. Ben arrives at Sir Charles's for his lunch date with Polly, but he is informed by the doctor that she is missing. He then asks Ben to investigate around the area where the homeless man was killed, as he feels that Polly is in danger, and the area might provide clues as to what's going on. Ben arrives at the warehouse and observes the war machines undergoing further weapons tests. His presence is detected by one of the machines, which begins to bear down on him. Episode 3. The machine stalls, thereby allowing Ben to escape. Green alerts the workers to search for him so they can eliminate him. Ben manages to get to the outer doors of the building, where he encounters a hypnotized Polly, although he doesn't realize that she is being controlled. He tells her that they need to get away, but she demands to know what he saw in the warehouse. Ben tries to take her away with him, but instead she attempts to lock him inside, causing him to struggle with her for the lock. Some of the workers then arrive and take Ben into the warehouse, as he still tries to reason with Polly to get the doctor's help. Green orders Ben to be killed, as he is an obstacle for their plans, but Polly announces that Brett has told her that Ben is instead to be used as a labourer to help build the war machines. As the others resume their duties, Ben thanks Polly for fooling them, but she appears to be under WOTAN's control, and she orders him to begin work. After several hours, fatigue is starting to set in as several workers collapse and are taken away. Polly also has been roped into assisting into the construction of the machines, and is feeling the draining effect of non-stop work. Ben tries again in vain to bring her to her senses, and noticing that the lack of guards around, makes another attempt to escape. Before he leaves, he locks eyes with Polly, who resumes her work, and Ben makes his way back to Sir Charles. Green arrives and demands to know where Ben is, but Polly starts to show signs of recovering from the hypnosis. Green then orders her to be taken to WOTAN so she can be punished. At Sir Charles's house, the doctor is worried since Ben has been gone for so long. Sir Charles suggests getting the police involved, but the doctor says that could cause the conspiracy to go to ground. Sir Charles says that without concrete proof as to what's going on, he can't delay the full integration of WOTAN to all the world's computers. Ben returns to the house and explains everything that he saw to the doctor and Sir Charles. Sir Charles is incredulous at this and doubts the story, but the doctor says that he believes Ben and that they need to do something to prevent WOTAN from carrying out its plan. Sir Charles decides to get the police involved, but the doctor and Ben said they won't be any match for WOTAN or the machines. He ignores their concerns and says that if things go as badly as they say they will, then the police can call in the army for reinforcements. He then places a call to the Minister of Defence, who orders the army to deploy anyway in order to investigate the threat. Sir Charles and the commanding officer of the deployed troops arrive at the warehouse and they begin to investigate it. Once inside, the soldiers encounter the war machine, and Green commands it and the workers to attack them. The soldiers' weapons have no effect on the machine, as they are somehow being prevented from firing, and many of them are killed before the rest retreat. The Doctor and Ben arrive and observe as the machine breaks out of the warehouse and pursues the surviving soldiers. Sir Charles issues an ultimatum for surrender to the warehouse, but it is ignored and the machine continues towards their position. They watch as the rest of the soldiers' weapons, including their grenades and heavy machine guns, are also rendered inoperable. The commanding officer orders a total retreat, and they flee with the exception of the Doctor, who stands his ground against the oncoming machine. Episode 4. Ben urges the Doctor to retreat to safety, but he refuses, and the machine eventually comes to a stop beside him, taking no further action. The Doctor explains to the others and the recently arrived Minister of Defence that the computer within the machine isn't fully programmed yet, and as a result, shorted out. The Doctor and Sir Charles inform the Minister that there will be more machines placed at various strategic points, which causes him to issue a citywide alert. Ben informs the Doctor that Polly has gone missing, but he tells Ben that he needs to focus on decoding the war machine's programming. He manages to crack it and informs the Minister that 11 more machines are within a 30-mile radius of the city, and they are scheduled to begin attack at midday. However, unbeknownst to them, some of the machines are experiencing issues with the programming and are going rogue. The commanding officer brings Major Green to speak to Sir Charles and the Minister. However, even though he is free of WOTAN's influence, he cannot remember a single thing about the last few days. The Doctor suggests that he be sent for medical treatment, and then he admonishes Sir Charles for his actions as they have led to the unnecessary deaths of so many soldiers and workers. Meanwhile, one of the rogue machines is terrorising the streets, and the military advises for people to stay indoors until it is dealt with. Ben again tries to appeal to the Doctor to help him find Polly, but he replies that he needs to focus on the bigger picture. The Doctor is then informed by Sir Charles that the rogue war machine is approaching Battersea Power Station, and the Minister asks if there is any way that they can stop it. The Doctor says that he has deduced that the war machines are electromagnetically controlled, and if they can capture it, then they can possibly stop the others. They then begin a plot to trap the machine. Back at the post office building, Brett and Crimpton are desperately trying to alter the programming of the rogue machines to bring them back under control. Polly arrives and explains that she has come to be judged by WOTAN for her actions. Brett says her judgment will have to wait as she is needed to help them regain control of the war machines. At the ambush site, the Doctor explains his plan to trap the war machine in a magnetic field. However, in order for it to work, the field will have to be activated from inside the trap, and Ben volunteers for the job. The plan works and the machine is trapped within the field and all its weaponry is disabled. The Doctor is then able to enter the trap and shut the machine down. With the midday deadline approaching, he reprograms it to go against WOTAN at the post office building. Ben realises that that is the most likely place that Polly went to and dashes off to find her before she comes to any harm. He gets there minutes ahead of the machine and is able to rescue her just before it bursts into the control room. Crimpton is killed as he tries to protect WOTAN, and the war machine succeeds in destroying the supercomputer. Brett is suddenly released from WOTAN's influence, just as the Doctor had earlier predicted to Sir Charles. The Doctor and the others arrive at the tower, and after he confirms that the other war machines are now inoperable, the Doctor slips away unnoticed. Back at the TARDIS, the Doctor is waiting for Dodo when he is approached by Polly and Ben. Polly tells him that Dodo has recovered from WOTAN's mind control, but has decided to stay in London and sends him her love. The Doctor is incredulous at this perceived slight and wishes the duo goodbye. As they leave, they turn back and notice him slip into the TARDIS, which Polly finds unusual. Ben remembers that he forgot to give Dodo's key back to the Doctor, and they go back to return it. They find the door locked, but Polly uses the key to open the door, and they go inside just as it starts to dematerialise. End of the story. So that's the story recap out of the way, and we're now going to go over to the trivia section with Tricia. Over to you, Trish.
Cool, thank you very much. So the air date for the War Machines is the 25th of June to the 16th of July 1966. We have Ian Stewart Black back as our writer for this week. We spoke about Ian last week because he also wrote The Savages, which makes this the first time that 2 consecutive stories are written by the same person.
Ah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. The idea from the story actually came from an idea by a gentleman by the name of Kit Pedler. And he was being interviewed for a position as science advisor for the series, and they were asked to sort of say, like, what would you do with this particular scenario? And so he pitched this idea, and the producers really liked it, so they decided to develop it into a full story, which is why he has based on an idea from Kit Pedler. Pat Dunlop was then hired to do the full set of teleplays, but he quit because he was busy with other work, and so Ian Stewart Black was brought in to get the writing for the story done.
Cool.
The director for the story is Michael Ferguson. This is the first of 4 directing credits for Michael. We'll see his work again in The Seeds of Death, The Ambassadors of Death. He has a bit of a thing for death. And The Claws of Axos.
And again, a nice back catalogue of who credits to have to your name.
The working title for this story was Doctor Who and the Computers. I think in terms of...
just no.
Well, in the 60s, Doctor Who and the Computers was probably a great title.
Yeah.
In 2020, War Machines aged better.
Yeah.
The titling style for each episode was actually very different from what we've seen before. So rather than the usual sort of overlay of the episode number or the episode title as it used to be a couple weeks ago, and who it was written by, the titling is done in sort of punch card style system.
Yeah, like of the old kind of school computer printouts.
Yeah, it's sort of like an old DOS print or even just like a punch, sort of line by line punch.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. I think episode 3, they did something really weird with it, where like it was like this rapid changing between black and white, and you know, you're bordering on like epileptic fit inducing at that point. But it's certainly an interesting style to go with.
Mm-hmm.
So the main villain of the story is WOTAN, the main computer machine. Many of the characters pronounce what is spelt as WOTAN, so it's spelt WOTAN, and they pronounce it as Wotan, which is the Germanic name for Odin.
Mm-hmm.
Which was interesting that they decided to go with that pronunciation, which opens so many ideas of, you know, Wotan, the All-Father, the All-Knowing. Oh, it just opens so many possibilities when you consider the source of the name.
But he's also like, I think, no, I could be wrong, but Wotan and Odin, they're both war gods as well. They have some capacity in war, so...
Yeah, exactly. So, only one War Machine prop was actually created. They're all numbered, so they just changed out the number each time. Which I love. It's total, like, Doctor Who way of doing it. It reminds me of The Chase, where they had, like, all these Daleks streaming into the time machine, and it was actually just 4 just going around in a circle until someone fell over, and then they decided to stop.
Or that one person with just a variety of false moustaches and beards.
This is the only time during the first or second Doctor's era where we're replacing the entire crew of the TARDIS. There is now no continuing character from the previous story into the next, because Dodo's not going with them. Which kind of feels a bit like an end of an era, because we sort of had that string of Susan and Ian and Barbara, Ian, Barbara and Vicky, Vicky and Stephen, Stephen and Dodo. It was this nice sort of continuing thread.
Yeah.
And even though, say, Dodo never knew Vicky, or even though Dodo never knew Susan, rather, it sort of feels like that last connection
is gone.
To Susan is now gone.
Yeah, which is a shame.
The string has been cut, which is a shame. Due to budgetary constraints, this story has no incidental music, which I didn't notice when I was watching it, but
nor did I.
Yeah, apparently there's no incidental music created for the story. One thing that eagle-eyed viewers will notice is the TARDIS prop has changed. And actually it changes in the middle of the story. So prior to the studio recording, the original TARDIS prop was refurbished. So the white window frames were painted blue, the lock was relocated to the right-hand side door, and the St. John's ambulance badge was painted over. A structural refurbishment also happened, which resulted in the walls being a rectangular cross section that no longer fit the square roof on top of it. So it sort of had to be this delicately balanced thing so the roof didn't fall. They used that delicately balanced prop for 10 years until it fell on Elizabeth Sladen's head. And then they changed it. That is saving your budget, if ever I heard. It's like, we know the prop is faulty. We don't have the money to fix it. Just leave it. And they left it for 10 years until someone was nearly concussed by the head of the top of the TARDIS landing on her head.
That's such a college, thing to do. It's just like, like strap like a couple of bottle caps to beneath the wonky table leg or something like that.
Yeah. Interestingly, Polly is another character who's never given an on-screen surname. Wright was used as the audition name for the character, and it's been adopted into spin-off novels and whatever, but we never see on screen that her name is Polly Wright.
Hmm.
And I imagine that's because that would make her too close to Barbara Wright. Like, are they
Yeah.
related?
You never know.
But yeah, so her name is never said on screen, her last name. Which is similar to Vicky. Vicky's last name was never said on screen either.
Hmm.
So, on to our cast. So, as Professor Brett, we have John Harvey. This is the first of 2 Doctor Who acting credits for John. His next one will be the Macra Terror. His non-Who credits include The Borderers, The Adventures of Robin Hood, and Z-Cars. John passed away in 1982. Major Green is played by Alan Curtis. This is Alan's only Doctor Who acting credit. His non-Who credits include Curtain of Fear, An Enemy of the State, Footballers' Wives, which is a program I vaguely remember from the early 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
Sir Yellow, Up Pompeii, and also
Z-Cars.
Sir Charles is played by William Mervyn. Again, only Doctor Who acting credit for William. His non-Who roles include The Odd Man, It's Dark Outside, All Gas and Gaiters, Crown Court, and The Railway Children. William passed away in 1976. Moving on to our new companions. First off, we have Annika Wills as Polly. So, similar to some previous companions that we've seen, Annika was one of the actresses considered for the role of Susan. Though she never actually auditioned, she was considered prior to the audition phase. While she was portraying Polly on television, she was married to Michael Gough, who we previously discussed played the Celestial Toymaker. They also had 2 children, and one of the children was named Polly.
Oh.
That wasn't because of the character. Polly, the child, was born before Polly, the character, was a thing. It's just a weird coincidence. Annika has returned to the role of Polly several times for Big Finish productions, and she's also done various other characters for Big Finish. Annika's non-Doctor Who work includes The Railway Children, again, Emergency Ward 10, The Saint, and The Avengers. Ben is played by Michael Craze. Now, Michael got into acting as a child as a soprano, and he had parts in The King and I and Plain and Fancy at Drury Lane. Once he left school, he went into rep, which is a common thing we see a lot of our Doctor Who actors. They go into repertory theatre, and from there he got into television. When he was 20, Michael actually directed and acted in a film called The Golden Head, which actually won an award at the Commonwealth Film Festival.
Oh.
At the age of 20. He's had other television roles, including Dixon of Dock Green and Z-Cars. Towards the latter part of his life, Michael only acted occasionally. He also managed a pub, which I think makes him the second person we've discussed who's had a pub.
Yeah. I can't remember who it was, but...
Didn't someone have a pub with John Pertwee at one point?
Why do I think of Emma Thompson's dad owning a pub? I could be completely
No, it wasn't
wrong.
Emma Thompson's dad.
No, but no, but I think that's another thing that, not just in Who, but English actors in general, they have this thing of where they own either they run it or they own it and let someone else run it type thing, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. Michael's brother Peter also appeared in Doctor Who. He was Daco in the Space Museum.
Yeah, that's my trivia note gone.
Sorry, I didn't know that was the one you had.
No, that's okay.
I think we also see Peter again.
We do. We see him in the War Games, I want to say.
When we come around to that, I won't mention it and you can have your trivia note back.
Yes.
Michael passed away, sadly, in 1998 after suffering a heart attack, which resulted in a fatal fall down the stairs, which is quite upsetting. And now we're on to Goodbye Dodo. So again, we've another case of an actor's contract expiring and just not being renewed. No other reasons given, just not going to renew the contract, going to move on to new characters. It's something that we see later that a lot of the time the new showrunner likes putting their stamp on the show by having their own companions. Do you know? And there's a lot of talk that that's why certain other people left over time. But again, it's a case of the contract wasn't renewed, so she didn't stay on. And the reason why Dodo doesn't appear in the last 2 episodes and why we don't get a goodbye is because Jackie Lynn's contract expired at the end of episode 2. So they didn't bother doing anything to bring her back for the 2 episodes that she wasn't under contract for, which I think is a bit Unfortunate.
Yeah, like you, like I know. I suppose, like, yeah, like you're hired for a certain number of episodes as opposed to a certain number of stories, but it's still like a balls. Like,
But just pay her as a guest actor for those two
yeah.
or something, do you
Mm,
know? Or do like a small contract just to finish out the story.
mm.
There's 2 notes here on Dodo's life. So Jackie Lane, we've discussed, didn't really do a lot of acting after who she went on to become a
Theatrical agent, wasn't she?
an agent, yeah. And she was an agent for some people who are actually on Doctor Who. Dodo's life after she stayed in London. There's 2 conflicting versions, one of which is from the expanded novel universe of Doctor Who, and one of which is quite recent. So the novel Who Killed Kennedy doesn't give a good future for Dodo. She's put in psychiatric care after her dealings with WOTAN. She gets shock therapy for months. She's put in a mixed gender ward and is nearly raped. After being declared a hopeless case in terms of her psychiatric health and going through an interrogation from a future enemy of the Doctor, she's turned loose in London with her memory wiped. She's homeless for a while, before she eventually meets a man by the name of James Stevens. They begin a relationship, they move in together, very nice. She finds out she's pregnant, and then she gets shot. Whoever wrote that book, what did Dodo ever do to you to deserve something like that? Because fuck that as a continuation of a character.
That's a horrible outcome. Horrible, horrible outcome.
Like, what did Dodo ever do to deserve that? That's horrific. I prefer to go with the COVID lockdown Farewell Sarah Jane special that was written by Russell T Davies, which has Dodo alive and well and appearing with other people from Who.
Yeah, and we're very happy about that.
Yeah.
And we'll stick with it that way.
Yeah. So as far as we're, because canonically, the novels aren't technically canon, so canonically, Dodo's fine.
There's like, sure, it's not the first time, because Bullet Time, the book you gave me, has
Oh yeah, sure. Sarah Jane gets shot at the end of it.
has Sarah Jane gets shot. So yeah, like, it's not the first time and it won't be the last time.
Yeah.
But then again, the words canon and Doctor Who, you know, it's like it's a grey area.
It is. It is. So we have gone through our story recap. We have gone through our trivia. It is now time for our character discussion. So, Paddy, the Doctor. What do you think of the Doctor in The War Machines?
Another great performance from John Connor. Sorry, I mean the Doctor. I like that he's very mysterious in this story. And like it like that mysterious nature is like really kind of lent credence by the big flowing cape and like the disappearing act he constantly seems to pull as well, especially at the end. It was like, where the hell did he just go? This is a great performance from William Hartnell. It really is. Going back to like the really, really early days of the show, where it was like he was this unknown mysterious figure, and like the sequence where Rotan tries to, you know, mind control him over the phone. I love seeing Hartnell play Doctor in danger.
Yeah.
Because he does it in 2 ways. He does it as an old man being assaulted, but he also does it as like this ageless character, like, you know, fighting against, like, you know, this insurmountable power, and it's just really good. Like, he's just like, William Hartnell is like, again, showing why he was the perfect pick to start this whole franchise off. And
Definitely.
why his performances stood the test of time, and why he's a lot of like he's in my top 5, and he's just amazing. I loved his thing at the end, you know, like with Dodo, just that whole like, well, of all the ungrateful,
Her gratitude,
yeah,
or simply her love.
Her love,
There's
yeah.
gratitude for you.
And again, we get back to that old kind of bluster, you know, the fa type thing. I think he's great, like, and like I like his interactions with the new people, like with Polly. He knows just how capable Polly is. Like he doesn't need to mother hen her. And again, like, it's like that thing with, you know, Ben, like, where like the Doctor like, he knows that the priority lies in locating the war machines and trying to trap them. He knows that now that Dodo's being taken care of, Polly is also capable of taking care of herself. So we should keep our focus on the overall problem. And while that may seem a bit callous, I think it's the Doctor gauging people. Like, he's using his innate ability to ascertain how good people are.
Yeah, I have seen online the Doctor gets a lot of flack for apparently disregarding Ben and Polly's safety and not giving a shit about them in this story, which I don't get at all. Like, when Polly first goes missing and Ben goes off to try and find her, and then Ben is delayed coming back, the Doctor's really upset that something may have happened to them. But
yeah,
one of the places where I go for a lot of the sort of like who played who and stuff, that type of thing, is the TARDIS fan wiki. And there was like this huge bullet point, like giant paragraph going on about how the Doctor was very callous and like saying, like, basically implying that the Doctor didn't care about Ben and Polly and he only cared about destroying Wotan, and that it showed this part of his personality that doesn't care about others or whatever. I'm like, that wasn't the way I read the situation at all. He knows that Polly's quite capable, and he's sure that, like, if they destroy the machine, Polly will be fine.
Yeah.
Because we saw that with Major Green. He was fine once they destroyed the machine. So he knows that Polly will be fine, but also, I mean, he had to focus on the issue at hand, which was these deadly things that were going to kill people were going to be released across all of London, and he had to stop them by 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's him not caring about them. I think it's just, unfortunately, he had to prioritize the needs of the many, unfortunately.
But as well, like, that for me, that argument doesn't really hold up in the way that Ben and Polly are presented.
Yeah.
Like, they're not damsels in distress, either of them. They're presented, like, and we're going to talk about it now when we switch over to them. So that I think it's, like, from my perspective, it's the Doctor using what he's learned through his recent travels since he took on board Ian and Barbara, and being able to see how capable people are. Like, we have a thing there where it's like, I have to stop this machine. Ben and Polly are capable, they'll be fine. Versus, Stephen, stay in the TARDIS, you're going to cause trouble.
Yeah.
And that's someone that he has travelled with.
Yeah. No, I think right from the off, I think the Doctor has great time for Ben and Polly.
Yeah.
Right from the off. The other things I love about the Doctor in the story were, again, I mentioned it last week with the Savages. We have Wotan identifying the Doctor as different.
Yes.
The Doctor's mind is the mind we need. And we can tell in the way that he is able to defend himself or fight off the influence over the telephone line just how different he is. And we also get a hint of his telepathic / hypnotic abilities that we kind of got a little bit into in the Sensorites. You know, he kind of said, oh yeah, me and Susan can kind of do this thing, but Susan was better at it. But we see a little bit of it again where he's hypnotizing Dodo.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've seen him hypnotize people before.
I don't think so, no.
Spoiler alert, we will again. Maybe not for a while. I don't know. But we will again, to the point where it becomes an oh no, not again moment for someone in the future. But I love that. I love building out the Doctor that way. I always love. And I love that we get to see that with Hartnell, because I don't like when people write him off.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Like, and like, this is the one thing that I've just kind of noticed, right, is that we had the Time Meddler, which was the start of a new era. Okay? And we had a really strong performance from William Hartnell. Really strong. We now have the War Machines, which is also a start of a new era for William Hartnell. And again, another really strong performance from him.
Yeah, definitely. The one thing I would maybe call out as a teeny criticism.
Yes.
From what we see in the episode, and I haven't seen next week's episode, so I don't know. He's kidnapped people again, unintentionally. They walk in the door.
Okay, no, this is not kidnapping. This is stowaway. This is very different. Very different. Stop besmirching the man's legacy. He is not some sort of just kidnapper.
That's why I said unintentionally.
That money was simply, those companions were simply resting on my ship. Oh. But yeah, so I think we've talked about our two new arrivals a fair bit in discussing with the Doctor. So
Yeah.
as always, I think we should do. Now we're in a bit of a different one this time, right? Because we have two brand new characters coming on.
Yes.
We have one story-based companion, Sir Charles, and then we have Dodo.
Yep.
So do you want to do Charles and then the two new, and then talk about Dodo?
I think that makes sense.
Cool. So for Sir Charles, what are your thoughts?
I think Sir Charles he's a man of his time, is the way that I put it, right? He's a very nice man. He's very welcoming, very helpful, but does not take young people very seriously, and is very much, now you listen here, young man. We're going to do this, and like the way he speaks to Ben, it's just like, you're too young to have an opinion that matters.
Yeah.
So he doesn't take young people very seriously. I was a little bit concerned that he was unwilling to believe anything against WOTAN. I was a little bit concerned about that, but then at least he did put through a call to the minister. He did bring in the army or whatever. He just didn't want to accept, I think, that this amazing technological advancement that they were doing was being an evil dictator thing. One question I have.
Yeah.
Do we find out his position within the government?
Like, so is okay, this is the way that I thought of it, was that, like, obviously there's like the Royal Academy of Science.
Yes.
So wouldn't he be like, if there is such a role, like chief scientific advisor to the crown, maybe something like that?
Yeah, I don't know, because like he has to contact a minister to get something done.
Well, like, okay, so
But
so,
then he is given power over the military. Like, he takes the loudspeaker. He's given the military orders. So I don't know what his job is.
okay, so like obviously the minister is a minister of defense, because this is but like, no, I think, like, as he's probably like, like okay, so he's the chairperson, he's the head of the Royal Academy of Science. So he's probably a leading civil servant in that regards. And obviously this minister is fairly savvy in the sense of there's a situation, while it is a military situation, there's also some sort of a root in it in this newfangled thing of computers. How would I give it to the expert? But one thing I like about Sir Charles is that, as you said, that even though he doesn't like the idea of Wotan being evil, he does do the right thing, and I put it down that he's very practical, who doesn't seem to let his ego get in the way of things. Because sometimes you see that, like, with, like, well, no, I'm a man of science, I should know these things. And that also kind of ties into the fact that he defers to the Doctor's clearly superior intellect. Like, he doesn't try and go, measure for measure with him, which is great. No, is he kind of quick to call in the army? Like, as opposed to, like, because the Doctor said just contacting the police, and he's like, no, we'll go one step further, we'll bring in the military. It's like, in the end, it's a justifiable action, but is it?
That's something where overall I was a little confused. Because I don't know if it's just the writing or the editing, but I was very confused as to, because the Doctor took issue with it.
Yeah.
But I don't know why, because it worked.
I'm
a bit confused, but that whole bit kind of confused me a little bit. I don't think he jumped the gun. I think he actually assessed the situation correctly. Putting British police officers against that machine, I think, would have been a massacre in the making. So I think he made the right choice. That's something called a war machine.
Now, see, this is the thing where it comes into question, right? So, like, my viewpoint, or the way I read it, and now this might be using a small bit of future knowledge to assess it, is that we know that the Doctor doesn't really favour the military option. Even when he's with a certain specific group that has strong military ties, he doesn't really favour that option. Now, using civil authorities, so the police in this stage, is solely for the protection of the civilian population, because his overall plan is to try and herd one of these war machines, or at least incapacitate it. And if he brings the military into it, that could lead to unwanted casualties. And I think the Doctor tries to avoid casualties whenever he can, and he knows that bringing the military will lead to it. Now, again, that's me just probably arguing semantics and stuff like that. And in the end, as I said, it is the justifiable course of action. But
yeah, I just don't know if it makes sense in this story, in particular. And we've seen the Doctor not like weapons, but we haven't seen the Doctor not like military specifically up to now.
Yeah, as I said, that's why I was like, am I using my own future kind of assessment of the situation to come into it? Maybe this is probably the first indication that he's not a huge fan of military interference or interjection, whatever we want to phrase it. But it does set a kind of very interesting precedent for things to come along.
Yeah.
So, speaking of the military, we have our new action man, and this time he is trained to be an action man. What are your thoughts on Ben?
That answers the overwhelming question you always had about Ian.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Ben?
I like Ben. He had one or two moments where I was like, I fucking beg your pardon? Particularly when he saved Polly from the guy hitting on her in the bar.
Yeah.
And then said, well, that's what you get for leading him on, or something like that.
Yeah.
That, I was like, excuse you? However, I will let him off the hook a small bit. A, because he more than makes up for it later. And he clearly cares about her a great deal.
Yeah.
But also, he was in a bad mood already. And then this random one comes over and tries to, get him engaged and stuff. And if you're not in the mood for that, you're not in the mood for that. And then from his perspective, she goes and fucking gets herself in trouble with someone and I suppose I'll go over and save her or whatever. I don't take that as being an overly negative thing about him.
No, I think right. I wasn't a huge fan of that whole what do you expect mentality or that comment. I wasn't a huge thing of it. And I think going forward, his nickname for her, which is Duchess, and the way that he's obviously a man of his time, okay? And that's the thing you gotta, I suppose, take into account. He's a man of his time, and Polly is a woman of his time, woman of her time. And I think their interactions are going to be makes up for some very interesting character development and character relationships as the show goes on. And I'm also thinking that his mentality as well, when he's going to start interacting more with the Doctor, will it be he might make that sort of comment to Polly in front of the Doctor, and what will the Doctor's reaction to it be? Because as we know, the Doctor is one of those people that loves, he really appreciates intelligent women and strong women, and he really kind of gets on with them, and he knows their worth. And I don't think he would take kindly to someone belittling Polly just because of, I won't say her flirtatious nature, which it isn't. It's just he's a very amiable person.
I think a lot of with Ben and Polly and the whole Duchess thing.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that just comes down to Ben being insecure. I get the sense that Ben is kind of like this, maybe lower class guy who joined the Navy because he didn't really have any other options, and he sees Polly as this very well put together middle class woman of the time, so I think it's more a case of a little bit of classism on his part, but unintentional, but more sort of deprecating on himself. So it's him feeling bad for himself. However, the one thing I will say to him is that he is definitely, I think from what we saw here, he's definitely going to be an action man. In a similar way to Ian was. He is very dedicated to Polly. And I think that's the one thing, is that you can maybe get a bit hooked on what he said in the bar and calling her Duchess and kind of his sort of playing with her in that way, which I think is playful.
Yeah.
Aside from that comment. But like, as soon as he figured out that something happened to her, he was single line, what about Polly? What about Polly? What about Polly? Hello? Hello? What about... To anyone who would listen, and even those who wouldn't, it was, what about Polly? So I think I'm really looking forward to seeing how the two of them interact together, whether they'll be like a baby version of Ian and Barbara, or how that will work. The one thing that I think may not have gone over well with people, and I didn't look it up specifically, because I didn't want to if it didn't go over well, was he does manhandle Polly a bit. But like really all he does is trap her arm behind her back and pull her out a door.
So like you see it a lot in kind of like adventure stories, in that I've seen it, I think from my own perspective, like I might be kind of sheltered in the view of it, is that usually it's from the viewpoint of a very strong female character that is like trying to insert herself into a position that's very precarious against her, while the men are trying to protect her from that. So it's that sort of put her over the shoulder, put her into the room going, no, you can't, we're trying to protect you from danger, you can't put yourself into danger type of thing.
Yeah.
So while okay, he may have been a bit unnecessarily rough, I think his intentions are honourable and probably warranted at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My last thing about Ben,
Yeah.
right? Can you say whipped?
Was it whoopah?
She has that boy wrapped around her middle finger like there is no tomorrow.
I think, like, I'm actually really looking forward to their time on the TARDIS for however long it may be, because, like, as I said, they're probably going to butt heads a small bit in that kind of bantery fashion. But at the end of the day, they're going to be there for each other. Like, as I said, like, Ben will like fight to the hilt for Polly, and I'd say the Doctor as well.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how their dynamic together plays out, because I love Ian and Barbara, and I will always love Ian and Barbara forever. Mm-hmm. But they were presented to us originally as colleagues, friendly colleagues, but colleagues nonetheless. And it took a very long time for them to get sort of, for us to see them be relaxed with each other. I'll put that way. And I know there was a lot of concern around portraying them as being in a relationship or not being in a relationship or whatever. But Ben and Polly are quite relaxed from the off. So I wonder if we're gonna, if we can avoid that problem, and we can just see the fact that they can admit on screen that they care a great deal about each other and just move on with it, as opposed to like having to look for the teeny tiny moments and just scream at Ian to kiss Barbara, for crying out loud. Yeah.
So before we start going down memory lane and remembering some of our fond memories of Ian and Barbara, how about we discuss Polly?
I love Polly. I think Polly's great.
Yeah, I was like, don't let that hip and happening chick facade fool you. She's very capable and she's very, very strong.
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say from the minute that she's presented, like, I think she puts up this amazing facade that you immediately know that isn't what Polly is all about. You know that there's going to be something more to her.
Yeah. I think she's a very nice young girl. She definitely gonna be very relatable for younger members of the audience. She's very modern. I think Dodo came from essentially the same time period as Polly, and I really hope they keep Polly's modern aesthetic and her modern mentality, because Dodo lost that when they decided they didn't want her to have a Cockney accent. She had that nice strong start at the end of the massacre, and then it went absolutely nowhere.
But see, the introduction of these two characters, they're completely polar opposites. Like, we're introduced to Dodo at the end of a story, and then she's immediately thrust into a space adventure. Every other companion has had at least one episode of development in their time period before going on the adventure. And it's just like, so Polly, we're given a lot more familiarity with Polly, so that when we go into our next adventure, we know kind of what we're walking in with,
But she shows great sense of humor, very independent. Also, you kind of get the sense that, and this isn't a slight on Dodo, it's not intended to be, but that she has a very strong mind. Little bits of Polly shine through when she's hypnotized.
That was one of my notes, is that like she has like this, you know, that she's going to have like, she's not going to be a typical damsel in distress. Like she may have those moments where she is in distress, but she has a great willpower to try and overcome it. You know, because like, you know, like letting Ben escape and trying to fight back against Wotan's influence. Like, so I think we're onto like a pretty good character with Polly.
What is about women whose last name are Wright? Are they like?
Well, it's not official, but you never know. Like, so yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, like, as opposed to just like, you know, as you kind of said, like the one lead, like one leaves, one comes in, one first in, first out type thing. It's interesting to see a pair start off. Like, we haven't had a pair start for a very long time. So now that we've discussed about the new incomers, we've got to talk about the leaver. And for myself, I don't really have a whole lot to say about Dodo in this story, because Dodo gets like, or Dodo and Jackie Lane both get the royal shaft in this story.
Oh yeah,
like
completely.
She's hypnotized by Wotan. Was it at the end of episode 1?
No, she's hypnotized pretty much at the start.
It
starts at the beginning.
Yeah, so she's hypnotized at the start, and then she gets saved by the doctor, and then she's packed off to the country, and then it's a, you know, thanks for everything, goodbye. Which, you know, like, I know that Dodo has been through a very great ordeal, but the way that it's written makes Dodo come across as really fucking rude.
Well, it's not even that. It just doesn't make sense with her character. Like, they said at the beginning, she has no family.
Yeah. And like, but that's what I'm saying, like the whole, like, the way that it's written. Now this is like, despite our, like, you know, our, you know, disagreements with Stephen as a character, his ending doesn't match his character. Like, so like, I don't view Stephen's ending as great. Even though, like, you know, he came out on the better side of things, his ending isn't great. Vicky's ending wasn't great. And now we have Dodo's thing isn't great. So like, we haven't had a really good character exit moment since, go back to them, Ian and Barbara. And I feel really bad for Dodo's legacy, because if the way this is the way that she goes out, and it's not fair. It's not fair to the character.
Yeah, and like, I said this already, but like, the thing with Ian and Barbara is Ian and Barbara's exit made sense for their characters. Now, I'm of two minds about Susan's departure and whether that made sense for her character. I think it made sense for her character in that story. I just don't make sense overall, but that's a different thing, right? Ian and Barbara's departure, as people who started traveling with the Doctor as companions, as opposed to Susan, who was his grandchild, their departure made sense.
Yeah.
Because all they talked about was wanting to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And had it been that this story took place in place of The Chase, for example, where they arrive back in London, they're helping the Doctor investigate this thing or whatever, and then Ian and Barbara decide to stay at the end, that would make sense for their character. But they've said that Dodo has no family.
Yeah.
Why does she want to stay? I think the reason why you can kind of get away with it, and maybe the reason why they just wrote it that way, is because, again, we don't see a whole lot of connection between Dodo and the Doctor. We haven't had them develop a relationship, so the idea that she doesn't want to stay with him, okay.
This is going to sound very harsh, but we got way more character development from Sarah Kingdom than we got from Dodo.
Yeah, like, in terms of like ranking companions and stuff, I have ranked Sarah Kingdom higher than Dodo.
Yeah, and that's not a great legacy for a character to have. Like,
no, particularly because she had so much potential at the beginning.
She did. There's a character that's going to come along in an awful lot longer time, like, you know, years down the line. That is very reminiscent of what Dodo started out as. Yeah, we just didn't get that, which is a shame. Yeah. And like, we're going to have a rambling on Wednesday about her. Yeah. And it'll be a very interesting rambling because of just Dodo's portrayal across the last number of stories that she's been in.
Yeah, like the thing with this story for me is she gets brainwashed fairly early on. Like I said, Wotan starts brainwashing her as soon as she meets it. And then it's when they're in the club that it gets solidified over the phone, right?
Yeah.
But, like, they portray her as a little bit dumb right from the off. So, why was she asking the doctor about the out of order sign when her travelling with him was caused by her mistaking the TARDIS for a real police box?
Yeah.
Like, that just seems silly. Although there is a brilliant moment. And I don't know if it was an ad-lib by Jackie Lane, but it was brilliant. So, when they arrive, unfortunately this is a story that has a high number of Hartnell struggles with his lines, I think. Mm-hmm. And one of them was when he was saying that he can sense that there's something alien.
Yeah.
And he says, I can scent, as in smell.
Yeah.
And Dodo just says, oh, it smells wonderful to me. And I'm like, I hope that was a Jackie Lane ad-lib just to cover the fact that he said scent, because in the I watched this on DVD and I watched with the subtitles on, and the subtitles say sense, so clearly it was a fuck up on Hartnell's part. And she was like, oh, it smells perfectly fine to me. I'm like
so will we move on to the villains?
The villains, we shall. So we have the War Machines and their creator, mastermind, central brain, whatever you want to call it, Wotan. Mm-hmm. So we go by our standard procedure. So what were your thoughts on the War Machines?
I really wish, like, okay, they're not characters as we know them, like, say, like, you know, because they're not sentient themselves. They're not like the Chumleys, they're not like the Mechanoids. They're essentially tanks.
I don't think the Chumleys were sentient.
I don't know, I think they were. Like, well, like, no, when I say sentient, as in, like, they were capable of thinking for themselves, like, you know, in the sense, because I don't think
they're not independent, but I think that was just, I think they may have been eventually, but they didn't get to that point.
Because, like, I'd love to know, like, I really wish
that's staying in.
Of course it is. I really wish that more time had been spent explaining how they work, because when their chief weapon is a smoke that they shoot.
What the hell is that?
What does it? Because it does the following: it kills people, it sets stuff on fire. Mm-hmm. And it also manages to magnetize every piece of weaponry that the army have. They can't fire their rifles or their Sten guns. The grenades don't work because everything has become magnetized. All because of this smoke. What sort of Mary Sue-esque fucking machine is this thing?
My read of the situation is that the smoke was used instead of a laser. That it should have been a laser, because a laser can light something on fire. A laser can kill you outright. And you could say that the energy generated by the laser or something was interfering with the weapons. But yeah, I was looking at going, is the weapon the smoke? Is the weapon fire? Is it a gas?
Yeah.
What is it? Getting shot in the face with smoke, what, like, because one guy does get shot in the face and falls down straight away. What did it? He just like poof, like, what is it?
Because like it reminded me of the tripods from War of the Worlds, and like, you know, the War of the Worlds tripods, they have two weapons: a heat ray and like this black smoke, which that's all it is. It's a choking black smoke. It's like grand. Maybe that's what you're going for, but no, this smoke apparently is the Swiss Army knife of the War Machines.
Well, because they have two weapon systems.
They have a hammer.
Because they have two hammers, one on either side, and they have two weapony thingies, one on either side.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So maybe it should have been that one was a smoky thing and one was a shooty thing.
Yeah, like they just remind me of something from Robot Wars. Smoke bomb. So unfortunately, an awful lot can't be said about them. So I suppose we might as well move on to Wotan. Unless you have any other thoughts.
The one last thing I'd say about the War Machines, though, is that they're it's almost like a human attempt to cross a Dalek with a tank.
pretty much.
And it didn't work very well.
As our friends on Half Measures were laughing at my comparison to the Daleks as a member of the wheelchair market. This is their competitor, and unfortunately, it's not going to sell very well. So, the big bad of this week.
Yeah, underdeveloped.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think WOTAN, could have been an interesting villain, but I think used at the wrong time.
Yeah, I mean, hypnotic computer, that's a bit creepy. Be able to hypnotize and direct people over phone lines, that's a bit creepy.
Mm.
My issue with it was that we never really find out how it works or how it knows what it knows. Why does it need it? Like, it knows what TARDIS means, a word that at this point in time, Susan made up.
Do you know what this reminds me of?
What?
And again, I'm going to make the statement that this is stolen by Star Trek. Do you remember the episode where Data and Geordi are doing a Sherlock Holmes recreation on the holodeck?
Yeah.
And Data solves it in like the first 2 minutes.
Yeah.
This is that. Like Ultron, WOTAN, never reaches his full potential. Because he's meant to be hooked up to every single major computer in the world. Like, this is meant to be a global threat. And we only ever see it, menace the streets of Soho.
He is going to be hooked up to everything. I don't think he is yet.
But, like, I think, like, there was so much, like, if this was made into a 6-parter, I wouldn't have complained because, like, there was so much... There's no danger in it for me. No. And even with the whole thing of the hypnosis and like they could have done so much with it, there's no real sense of impending dread. And for a villain like this and the war machines, it's way too confined. It needed to go either nationwide or global.
I don't even need it to do that. I just need to understand how WOTAN does what it does.
But he's the all-father. He's the all-father.
Yeah, but like, but they don't explain, like, how does it know what TARDIS means? How does it know that the Doctor, who it calls Doctor Who, which is a different thing, but how does it know that the Doctor is different? How does it have all of this future knowledge? Where did that come from? Did Ian and Barbara write a diary and this thing somehow got access to it? Because otherwise, how the hell do you explain this?
But I suppose at the end of the day, the message is clear. Beware of the postal service. That's pretty yeah. Don't fuck with Royal Mail because Royal Mail will fuck with you right back.
Oh, I love it.
So, another interesting character conversation. Another companion have left us. 2 more new companions after coming in. And we'll see where that leads us. But for the moment, we are now going to discuss our overall thoughts of the story. So, Trish, what did you think?
So, this is an interesting one for me. It's another story where I kind of went back and forth on my rating for the story. The things I liked. Science Doctor, I have always liked.
Yeah.
Always like Science Doctor. I think that's great. The premise of this supercomputer that can hypnotize people or whatever, very good premise. The war machines in a sort of human construct version of the Daleks, a little bit interesting. Not massively, but a little bit. Ben and Polly seem great. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they react in their next story to what they just walked into, because we don't get their reaction to the TARDIS this time around. They just walked in. All of that was great. And of course the Doctor being able to withstand it, his Hartnell being Hartnell, him standing up to the war machine at the end of episode 3, that was phenomenal. All of that. Where it loses points though is the underutilization of WOTAN as the enemy. I really like Ben and Polly. I think I'm going to really enjoy them as companions. Fingers crossed. But too much time was put into developing Ben and Polly that should have been done telling the story of WOTAN,
Yeah.
in my opinion. I mean, it's great that we got that much Ben and Polly, but we got it at the expense of the villain of the piece. And the second thing I didn't like was what they did to Dodo is just it irritates me because fundamentally to the whole thing the character contributed nothing.
Yep.
Really. Like, if we talk about Susan and Ian and Barbara and Vicky and maybe even Stephen to a certain extent, the Doctor kind of learned and grew through his interactions with them. He barely even interacted with Dodo. And when he did, it was a weird cross between treating her like a child and acknowledging that she can take care of herself. And I was like, what? So for me, it loses points on that we didn't get a good goodbye for Dodo. And overall, I gave it a 3, but I think I'm actually going to drop that to a 2.75 now that I'm thinking about it.
Cool. So,
yeah.
Two things. I think it's safe to assume that we know how Ben and Polly's futures are going to end up. He will establish one half of a very successful ice cream company, and she will make a living designing miniaturized toys for little girls. The second thing is stay the hell out of my notes, because I have the exact same feelings as you. It's that whole, team mentality thing. Very underutilized villain. No, I love Ben and Polly. I really do. And the time, obviously the show was used, or the episodes were used to establish them as characters because they're going to be the next companions. So we need to kind of see what they're all about. That being said, that time that was spent on them, as you said, was taken away from WOTAN, and building him up to be a bit more of a bigger bad than he's an awesome concept, amazing concept, but just way too beaten too early or too easily and way too confined. And again, that we've had now 3 character departures with Vicky, Stephen, and Dodo. Now I know that there was issues surrounding Maureen O'Brien's departure because of John Wilde's, but what we're kind of seeing here is that I think it's kind of hard it's a challenge for the writers to make a justifiable departure for the character that we've seen so far. And this sort of, love you bye type response, I would have preferred to have seen her have a sit down. Now, again, the contract issue arose, behind the scenes stuff arose, but a letter written by Dodo thanking him for everything, saying that she's seen so much but she can't keep doing it. Something that lends a small bit of credence to the character other than painting her as some sort of ditz.
Yeah, I mean, if they had played into the fact that, her mind was messed with.
Yeah.
And I think a letter actually would have been a lovely way of doing it. Just saying, thank you for everything that you've shown me, but I can't deal with the possibility of not knowing what I am doing and not having control of my own body. Yeah. I'm going to stay here.
Unless a companion is booted off the TARDIS for being completely self-serving, I don't think the Doctor should ever be angry at someone leaving, because even he had a fight with Stephen and he wasn't angry that Stephen left. Yeah. It just made him introspective. And William Hartnell, as we've said, does emotional acting really, really well. He does it amazingly. So I would have liked to have seen him read that letter and then do that sort of a clutch it to his chest type thing and a little sigh or whatever, because the scene could have been so easily written.
Yeah.
And I think it's just it's a shame that the last couple of character exits have been off base, and in this case a complete disservice to an actress. It's not fair. So I'm at a 3 as well at the moment, and I think I'll probably keep it at a 3 because I just enjoyed seeing Ben and Polly so much, and I enjoyed seeing the Doctor be that sort of do you want to remind me of when the War Machine was bearing down on him? Do you remember Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where the minecart is pushing up and you just see the light, show Indy, ready to rescue the kids? That's what that moment was for me. So anyone that was good with music editing, put the Slave Children's Revolt over that scene, and I'll be very happy.
Yeah, so we've done 2.75, which, should I bump it back up to a 3? No, I think I'm going to stick at the 2.75 because the Dodo thing really bothered me. So I'm going to...
No, yeah, like, I think like it's like we've changed scores around, and you know, like I think at the end of the day we settled on a score that we're happy with. Yeah. Well, obviously with the what was it, the massacre was a really interesting one because that score fluctuated so much, but no, I think a 2.75 is a fair score for it.
Yeah. And do you know what? That brings us to the end of season 3. This is the last episode of season 3.
Oh my god.
We're starting season 4 next week.
Ooh.
For anyone who's curious, our averages so far, Paddy's average for season 3 is 3.19. My average for season 3 is 2.94.
Mm-hmm.
Paddy's average for all 27 stories up to now is 3.53, and mine is 3.42.
We really do like Doctor Who.
We really do. We do.
Yeah.
We just don't like John Wells.
Yeah. But like, it's the thing about, I suppose, this type of thing is that we will have amazing episodes in a story that is pretty naff.
Yeah.
At the same time, we will also have shite episodes in a good story that they just bring down the overall thing, and that's, at the end of the day, that's what we're kind of reviewing, the whole thing. Because if we did it episode by episode, there would be a string of zeros across across certain things. So no, and like that being said, like it's like we would love to hear more thoughts about like what everyone thinks of these stories, because some people, they're only coming off our podcast because they've never seen Who before. Other people are refreshing themselves with older stories, and like we'd love you to go back and take a look at the stories yourselves and see, like, you could be seeing stuff that we're completely missing, and it just lends itself to good discussion, and that's what we want, and that's what we've always kind of wanted as well.
Yeah. And if anyone wants my copy of The Gunfighters, drop me an email and let me know.
It's a keeper. So guys, yeah, as Trish said, it's end of season 3 on to season 4. So Trish, what does season 4 bring us?
So season 4, we're going to be starting off next week with The Smugglers, which would be Ben and Polly's first adventure with the Doctor in the TARDIS, which would be good to know. We will also have our rambling on Wednesday for Dodo. So if you were a fan of Dodo, or if you want to hear more about our thoughts on Dodo specifically as a character, we'll be going through that in the rambling coming out this Wednesday. And
just one final note, our good friends at Dan and Paul of Half Measures, recently made a tweet about the time traveling team drinking game, where you drink every time Tricia swears or whenever Paddy says the Doctor. I'm going to put an add-on to that. Every time I say Ben and Polly, have a pint of ice cream beside you. Cool, guys. So until next week, bye.
Bye.